Hello and welcome to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre in Canada. I should have been speaking here this weekend. I'm not. I'm going to be speaking somewhere else in Toronto. The reason I'm not is extraordinarily relevant to current events in many areas and on many levels in many parts of the world. When you put the dots together, there is quite demonstrably, blatantly, obviously, a war on freedom of expression because some force is coordinating, like I say, on many levels, the destruction of freedom of speech. And whenever someone is trying to silence someone else, it's always, when you go deep enough, because they have something massively to hide that they don't want to be part of the public debate and the public discourse. When the Nazis were coming to power in Germany, they burned the books of people that disagreed with them, and they made sure that those who were trying to speak in public, warning about the Nazis and what their agenda really was, had their meetings banned or broken up by Nazi thugs. All these years later, we are going through exactly the same process, except instead of openly calling themselves Nazis, they now call themselves progressives. They call themselves, ironically beyond belief, anti-fascists while acting like them. And they seek, in the name of anti-fascism and in the name of stopping anti-Semitism, which is a completely misnomer, because anti-Semitism actually refers to a language group of peoples in the Middle East, the vast overwhelming majority of which are Arabic peoples. So even the very word is a misnomer and is completely misrepresenting what it actually means. However, the, again, irony is almost incomprehensible that those who claim to be anti-fascist and anti-racist and anti-establishment are using exactly the same methods of silencing, questioning, and other opinions that the Nazis used in Germany. It is, I was going to say it's cognitive dissonance, the ability to believe two things at the same time which are diametrically opposite. Now that is true of the great majority of these anti-fascist people that act like fascists, yes. But at the core, it's not cognitive dissonance because they know exactly what they're doing, and that is systematically seeking to silence that which they don't want the public to hear. Because, as I said in last week's videocast, we now live in a post-fact society. Facts no longer matter. It doesn't matter if what you're saying is true, what you're saying can be factually supported and documented. It doesn't matter. If it's not what these people, in all their different forms, these progressives, if it's not what they want people to hear and have the right to make an opinion on, then it has to be silenced, even though the facts are there to support what's being said. And if we come back to this Gutless convention center behind me. We booked this back in April, and it was going fine. There was no problem. We got to end of June, July, and they canceled the event. And they canceled the event because one letter was sent to them from people we're not allowed to know, with a content we're not allowed to see. And on that basis, people of Canada who, I mean, all the tickets have gone now, but they're almost gone then, we're in a position of being denied the right to hear what they've chosen to hear, which is nothing like what I'm supposed to be alleged to be saying. And it's such utter contempt for the basic human right of freedom of expression, and utter contempt for those Canadians who were in a position which could easily have happened, where they were denied the right to hear what they chose to hear. They lost hotels they'd booked. They'd lost airline tickets they'd booked. These people didn't care. And today I've been sent this, because this network of systematic, professional, coordinated censorship is going on everywhere. And I've been sent this article, whatever you want to call it, written by an organization in Britain called the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, or the CAA. And it's one of these attack dog organizations. There's another one in the northwest of England called the Northwest Friends of Israel. And what they do is contact venues, lie about what you're saying. They call you a Holocaust denier. No, I'm not. They call you, and I've said to them, produce the evidence. I said to newspapers who repeated their crap, produce the evidence, and the newspapers took the article down in minutes because they didn't have any, because it's not true. And, you know, Jewish people suffered appallingly, indescribably in Nazi Germany. You know those Nazis that were burning the books and stopping opposition speaking in public? And it turns my stomach beyond belief that there are those today who exploit mercilessly the suffering of those people in Nazi Germany to advance an agenda of censorship that suits them today. I can hardly comprehend a more disgusting expression of human behavior. And what these organizations have done, like the CAA, is they go to venues in Britain and they lie to them. They say I'm a Holocaust denier. They say I'm a modern day hate preacher. That's what the CAA keep spewing out. And what the venues do, just like this gutless lot behind me, is they just cancel the event. They don't come to us and say, hold on a minute, what these people are saying this? What's your response? Are you saying this? No. They just cancel the event. And we've had the Lowry Hotel in Manchester, did that. The Gladstone Theatre on the Wirral, Merseyside, did that. Sheffield City Hall did that. And we've had two more. Who are these? We've got Central Hall, Southampton, and the St Andrews Hall, Norwich. Almost all of them are council-owned. Local councils should be protecting the right of the people who they should be serving, protecting the right of their people to have the freedom not only to speak, but the freedom to choose to hear what they choose to hear. But no, all the same, doesn't come to you. Well, these people are saying this. What's going on? No, cancel the event. And I'll read you something really, really sinister. This is what the CAA say that they said to these venues. We explained that Mr. Icke's repertoire includes conspiracy myths. They don't know if they're myths because they've done no research into them. I've researched it for nearly 30 years, all over the world, 60-odd countries. And tropes classified as anti-Semitic in the international definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the British government. Take a deep breath and just consider the sinister nature of what they say is anti-Semitic today. Quote, making mendacious. Well, who says they're mendacious? They've not, they totally misrepresent what I'm saying. And secondly, what research have they done into any of it? Nothing. Dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as a collective, such as especially but not exclusively the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, and other societal institutions, and accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. Now, there's a number of things that come from that. First of all, if you say there are people manipulating in certain areas to a particular end, and you say they're American, or you say they're Australian, or you say they're Russian, especially Russian these days, or you say they're French, or say they're British, there is no definition of this kind to cover the fact that you can't say that. But one tiny group of people have a wording that basically says you can't criticize us, including the state of Israel, which is a government, a regime, or you can't criticize Zionism, which is a political philosophy, not a race, because otherwise the law will kick in. What is that about? This is a legitimate question. Why only in this area does anything like this apply? Then there's the boycott organizations around the world that have set out to boycott Israel in the occupied territories because they are occupying Palestinian land illegally and continuing to build more and more on which the UN recognizes is Palestinian land, illegally occupied. There are laws going through to sanction people who support the boycott on the grounds not of anti-Semitism, not of racism, quite the opposite, on a basis of justice for the beleaguered Palestinians and how they're being treated. How they're being treated by forms of racism, ironically. If there are groups to boycott America, 324 million people, 26 million, I think it is now. If there are boycotts to boycott Britain or France or Australia or South Africa, where are the laws to say you can't do that, or there are sanctions if you do? Nowhere. Nowhere. So what is it about one small group of people that they are protected? When I say they, I mean the Israeli government, etc. are protected in a way that no one else is from challenge, from criticism, from boycott. And it's an elephant in the living room. And because it's the elephant in the living room, these efforts are getting more and more extreme to stop anyone questioning anything whatsoever to do with this. And they won't debate with you. They've been given the chance after these lies about Holocaust denial and hate speech, hate preacher, to go onto the radio and debate with me to justify the lies. They all refuse. Why? What they're doing is throwing mud and running. And with people like this and these other list of gutless venues, they get away with it. And look at the wider picture in which this is all happening. That definition is basically saying, well, it's not, it is saying, there are no conspiracies. If you're talking about a conspiracy, you're talking about a myth. So the conspiracy to tell the world there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew there wasn't, that wasn't a conspiracy because they don't exist. And I was writing and saying at the time that the weapons of mass destruction lie was being sold to the public, it's a lie. It's a conspiracy to justify the invasion of Iraq. And I was told it's a conspiracy theory. And according to this, is by definition untrue. So you've got that in relation to this. And then, because it's now gone so far, this destruction of global free speech, we have Google and YouTube, who dominate their particular areas of the internet, openly saying they are going to suppress conspiracy theories, which, to use the Iraq analogy again, had Iraq been happening now and the lies about weapons of mass destruction being put out now, people like me saying, it's a conspiracy, it's a lie to justify the invasion of Iraq because they haven't got another excuse. YouTube and Google would suppress that because it's a conspiracy theory. And fact checkers controlled by the same people would come in and say, it's a conspiracy theory. This is not about racism, ladies and gentlemen. This is about a systematic global attempt, network, coordination to destroy freedom of speech on every level. And bring it now to current events on this continent, where I am now, North America, and what's happening in places like Charlottesville. We have, in my view, not two extremes in neo-Nazis and so-called white supremacists, and against them, the far-left organizations of violence like Antifa and Black Bloc, that technique called Black Bloc. I say they are not two extremes. I say they're one extreme, and they are mirrors of each other. They are both obsessed with race when I'm saying we're all one consciousness having different experiences. The body's just a vehicle. Don't get caught up on race. It's just a diversion. We're all one consciousness. They are obsessed with race, whether it's the white race or whether it's anti-racism. They're obsessed with race. I'm saying race and the racial divisions are a nonsense and an irrelevance. And yet, I'm supposed to be the racist, according to these idiots. So I'm saying Antifa and the white supremacists are just different labels for the same mentality. But what they're doing, you see, and we saw this with Trump. I mean, I'm the last one on earth to defend Trump. I mean, crikey, he's a man-child, and I think a very dangerous man because he's not very bright, and he's surrounded by very dangerous people who are actually running his administration. But when Trump said about Charlottesville, there was violence on both sides, he was only speaking the obvious. For goodness sake, the footage exists. I saw it the other day, where both the far left and the far right were kicking the crap out of each other. It was both sides. Why? Because they're the same mentality with a different label. However, what's happening in this mind game, because in the end that's what it is that you can only say that the problems are caused by the far-right neo-Nazis. Why? Because if you listen to the language, they talk about the neo-Nazis in America. There's been something kicked off in Quebec here, I was reading this week as well, in Canada. They talk of the neo-Nazis having a free speech protest, protesting in favor of free speech. And they have the Antifa, far-left violence groups who are protesting against hate speech. They're anti-hate. So here you go. You've now, in the public mind, those who haven't got a mind of their own, that is, you've connected anti-hate with the far left and their violence. But you have crucially, and this is the key, you have connected in the public mind the far right with freedom of speech. So if you're claiming to be in favor of freedom of speech, one of the most basic of human freedoms, then you must therefore be far right. And if you go to my website, davidicke.com, and you put in the search engine words along the lines of Antifa manual, you'll see what's claimed to be an Antifa manual. These are these far-left anti-fascists. And whether or what the background is to that you'll read in terms of its origin, you will read what the real agenda is. You will read how if anyone doesn't agree with you, you call them Nazi. It's a systematic process. They don't agree with you, you call them neo-Nazi, you compare them with Hitler. And this is exactly what is going on. And you know, people can say, including these people that run the venues, oh, well, it don't matter, he's only that nutter David Icke. What's it matter if he don't speak? We get a quiet life if we go with the bully boys. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech. It's not freedom of speech to conform, it's freedom of speech. And if I don't have freedom of speech, then no matter what your views are, neither do you. Because if I don't have freedom of speech, or anyone doesn't have freedom of speech, then what you call freedom of speech is merely the freedom to conform to what you are allowed, unmolested, to talk about. We live at a pivotal moment in human history. A pivotal moment where if people go on acting like these gutless people behind me and these others I've mentioned, if people just look the other way and allow this to continue, then you will have no freedom of speech. And there will be nothing that can even mildly be associated with freedom of speech in a very short time. Because the more you suppress freedom of speech, the more you suppress the ability to challenge the suppression of freedom of speech, and thus the destruction of it gets faster and faster and faster. So, what's anybody going to do about it? look the other way, go down the bar, or have some freaking backbone and some self-respect, because that's what we're going to need to meet this challenge, because it's coordinated and some very, very powerful forces behind it. Ironically, the forces that these people, the progressives and these Antifa and all these other people, the people they claim to oppose are the very people behind the, the fascist control of this world. Like I say, most are just too ignorant to see that, but at the core, they know exactly what they're doing.